Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair aboard the USS Dakota, watching the endless stars through the main viewport. The patrol mission had been quiet for 3 weeks now. Too quiet, if he was being honest. The Outer Rim territories were usually buzzing with merchant ships and mining vessels, but today the space around them felt empty and cold. "Captain, I'm getting some strange readings on long-range sensors," said Lieutenant Amy Carter from her station. Her fingers danced across the control panel as she tried to make sense of what she was seeing. Multiple contacts approaching from the direction of the Vega system. "They're moving fast, sir. Really fast." Morrison stood up and walked over to Amy's station. The sensor display showed 12 bright dots moving toward their position at incredible speed. These weren't human ships. Human vessels couldn't move that fast between star systems. The fastest Earth ships took weeks to travel between nearby stars, but these contacts had covered the same distance in what looked like hours. "How fast are they moving, Lieutenant?" Morrison asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Amy's face went pale as she checked her readings again. "Sir, if these numbers are right, they're traveling at speeds that should be impossible. Our best ships can't even come close to this kind of velocity." Commander Lisa Brooks, Morrison's second in command, moved to stand beside them. She had been with Morrison for 5 years and had never seen him look worried before. Today was different. Today, something was coming that they had never encountered before. "Should we send a message to Earth Command?" Lisa asked quietly. Morrison nodded. "Send a priority message to Admiral Wright. Tell her we have unknown contacts approaching our position. Include all sensor data." He paused and looked at the display again. "And tell her they're using technology we don't understand." As if responding to his words, the 12 contacts suddenly appeared on their short-range sensors. They had just dropped out of whatever impossible method of travel they had been using. The ships materialized in space, like ghosts becoming solid, their forms strange and beautiful and terrifying all at once. "My God," whispered Amy, "look at them." The alien vessels were unlike anything humans had ever built. They looked like they were made of crystal and light, their surfaces reflecting the stars in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Each ship was easily 3 times the size of a Dakota, and they moved through space with a grace that made human ships look clumsy and primitive by comparison. "Are they scanning us?" Morrison asked. "Yes, sir. But their scans are unlike anything in our database. It's like they're reading every atom of our ship at once." Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. These beings had technology that was far beyond anything humanity had achieved. Earth had been traveling between the stars for over 100 years, but they still used fusion engines and metal hulls and weapons that fired solid projectiles. These aliens seemed to exist on a completely different level of technological advancement. "Incoming transmission, Captain," reported Communications Officer Danny Walsh. "They're using some kind of universal translation system. I can understand what they're saying, but I don't know how that's possible." "Put it on screen," Morrison ordered. The main viewer shimmered and changed, showing the image of a being that was clearly not human. The alien was tall and thin, with skin that seemed to shift between different shades of blue and silver. Its eyes were large and dark, and when it spoke, its voice carried an unmistakable tone of superiority. "I am Fleet Admiral Korth Val Thine of the Zephyrian Hegemony," the being said. Each word was perfectly clear, despite being spoken in an alien language. "We have observed your primitive vessel and find it ... amusing." Morrison stepped forward, keeping his voice steady and professional. "I am Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Dakota. You have entered human space without permission. State your intentions." Val Thane made a sound that might have been laughter. "Human space? How delightfully quaint. We claim dominion over this entire sector of the galaxy." "Your Species has been playing with fusion fire and metal projectiles, while we have mastered the fundamental forces of the universe itself. The alien admiral gestured, and suddenly the Dakota's sensors were filled with detailed scans of their own ship. Morrison realized that Valthan was showing him exactly how primitive human technology looked to Zephyrian eyes. Your power systems are laughably inefficient, Valthane continued. Your hull construction is barely adequate for interplanetary travel, let alone serious space combat. And your weapons. The alien paused, as if searching for words to describe something particularly absurd. You still use kinetic projectiles. Actual physical bullets fired from metal tubes. We abandoned such barbaric methods when your species was still learning to make fire. Commander Brooks stepped up beside Morrison. Our weapons and defenses have served us well for over a century, she said firmly. Against other primitives, perhaps, Valthine replied. But you have never faced a truly advanced civilization. We have energy shields that can stop any physical projectile. We have plasma weapons that can disintegrate matter at the molecular level. We have technology that your people cannot even comprehend, let alone counter. Morrison felt anger rising in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. What do you want from us? Nothing, really. We are simply expanding our territory, and you happen to be in the way. We will give you one of your standard days to evacuate all human colonies in the Kepler sector. After that, we will demonstrate why resistance to the hegemony is futile. And if we refuse? Morrison asked, though he already knew the answer. Valthang's expression didn't change, but something cold entered his eyes. Then we will provide your species with an educational experience. You will learn firsthand the difference between your primitive technology and true galactic civilization. The lesson will be ... memorable. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the bridge of the Dakota in stunned silence. Morrison looked around at his crew and saw his own thoughts reflected in their faces. They were outgunned, outmatched, and facing an enemy with technology that seemed like magic compared to their own weapons and defenses. Sir, Amy said quietly, they're moving toward the New Denver colony. 2 million people live there. Morrison walked back to his command chair and sat down heavily. New Denver was one of humanity's largest settlements outside the solar system. It was home to families, children, people who had never even seen an alien ship before today. And now they were about to become the target of beings who viewed human technology as primitive and amusing. Communications, send an emergency message to Admiral Wright, Morrison ordered. Tell her the Kepler sector is under threat from an advanced alien force. Include everything we've recorded about their ships and weapons. He paused, thinking about Valthane's casual dismissal of human capabilities. And tell her they think our weapons are too primitive to be effective against them. Message sent, sir, Danny reported. Morrison stared out at the alien fleet as it began moving toward New Denver. The crystalline ships moved through space like living things, their surfaces rippling with energy patterns that human science couldn't explain. They were beautiful and terrible, and completely beyond anything humanity had ever faced before. Set course for New Denver, Morrison ordered. Maximum speed. Sir, Lisa said quietly, what can we do against ships like that? Morrison didn't have an answer. The Dakota was a good ship with a good crew, but she was built with human technology. Fusion engines, metal armor, and weapons that fired solid projectiles at high velocity. Everything that Valthine had dismissed as primitive and useless. But they had to try. 2 million people were counting on them, and Morrison had never abandoned civilians in his entire career. He wasn't about to start now, even if the enemy had technology that seemed impossible to defeat. The Dakota turned toward New Denver, her engines pushing her toward a confrontation that would determine the future of human civilization in space. The emergency alarms were screaming across New Denver Colony when Colonel Pete Walker burst through the doors of the command center. The colony's defense coordinator had been woken from sleep by the most terrifying message any human settlement could receive. Unknown alien ships were approaching, and they had given the colonists 1 day to evacuate or face destruction. "How many people do we need to get out?" Pete asked his operations officer, Major Karen Stone. 2.3 million civilians, sir," Karen replied, her fingers flying across her control panel. "We have 47 transport ships currently docked, but they can only carry about 50,000 people total. Even if we had more ships, there's no way to evacuate everyone in 24 hours. Pete felt his stomach drop. He had been a soldier for 20 years and had faced enemy fire more times than he could count, but he had never felt as helpless as he did right now. The numbers were simple and brutal. They couldn't save everyone, no matter how hard they tried. "What? About the defense platforms?" he asked, though he already suspected the answer wouldn't be good. 6 orbital defense stations, each armed with heavy railguns and missile systems, Karen reported. "They're the best weapons Earth Command has developed." "But sir, the intelligence reports from the Dakota say these aliens have technology we can't even understand." Pete nodded grimly. The defense platforms had been built to protect New Denver from pirates and hostile human forces. They were powerful enough to destroy any ship in the human fleet, but they were still just human technology. Metal and electronics, and weapons that fired solid projectiles, exactly what the alien admiral had called primitive and useless. "Send a priority message to Earth Command," Pete ordered. "Tell them we need immediate military support. Every ship they can spare." 3 hours later, Admiral Susan Wright received the desperate call for help aboard her flagship, the UES Liberty. The Fourth Fleet had been conducting training exercises near the Mars orbital shipyards when the message arrived, but Wright didn't hesitate for a second. "All ships, this is Admiral Wright," she announced over the fleet communication system. "We have a colony under threat from hostile alien forces. I want every vessel ready for jump in 30 minutes. This is not a drill." The Fourth Fleet consisted of 12 heavy cruisers and 36 destroyers, representing some of the most advanced military technology humanity had ever built. Each ship was armed with magnetic acceleration cannons that could fire projectiles at significant fractions of light speed. Their missile systems could deliver nuclear warheads across interplanetary distances with pinpoint accuracy. By human standards, they were the most formidable fighting force ever assembled. But as Wright looked at the intelligence reports from Captain Morrison, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were bringing knives to a gunfight. "Admiral, all ships report ready for jump," announced her communications officer, Lieutenant Brad Murphy. "Execute jump to New Denver system," Wright ordered. "All vessels maintain formation and prepare for possible combat upon arrival." The journey to New Denver took 18 hours, even using the fastest faster-than-light drives humanity possessed. When the Fourth Fleet dropped back into normal space, they found the Zephyrian ships waiting for them in high orbit above the colony world. Wright stared at the alien vessels through the Liberty's main viewport and felt a chill run through her body. The 12 crystalline ships hung in space like beautiful, deadly sculptures. They moved with a fluid grace that made human ships look clumsy and awkward by comparison. Energy patterns flowed across their surfaces in colors that didn't have names, and their very presence seemed to bend the light around them. "Incoming transmission from the alien flagship," reported Lieutenant Murphy. "Put it on screen," Wright ordered. Fleet Admiral Valthane appeared on the main viewer, his blue-silver skin shifting in the light. When he saw the human fleet, his expression changed to what could only be described as amused contempt. "How impressive," Valthane said, his translated voice dripping with sarcasm. "The primitives have brought their entire war fleet. 48 vessels armed with kinetic projectiles and chemical explosives. Truly, we are in awe of your technological prowess. Wright stepped forward, keeping her voice steady despite the fear that was gnawing at her stomach. I am Admiral Susan Wright of the United Earth Fleet. You are threatening innocent civilians. Withdraw from this system immediately. Or what? Valthane asked. You will fire your primitive bullets at us? You will launch your crude missiles. In our general direction? The alien admiral gestured dismissively. Your weapons cannot even penetrate our basic defensive systems. Observe. Valthane's ship turned toward several unmanned cargo vessels that had been abandoned in orbit around New Denver. The alien vessel's weapon systems activated, and beams of pure energy lanced out toward the human ships. The cargo vessels didn't explode or burn. They simply ceased to exist, their matter converted to energy and dispersed harmlessly into space. Molecular disintegration weapons, Valthane explained casually. We break down the atomic bonds that hold matter together. Your ships, your weapons, your people, all can be reduced to their component atoms in moments. Wright felt sweat beading on her forehead. The demonstration had been terrifyingly effective. The cargo ships had been completely destroyed without leaving any debris behind. It was like they had never existed at all. Now, Valthane continued, let me demonstrate why your weapons are useless against us. Please, feel free to fire upon my ship with your most powerful weapons. I insist. Wright knew it was probably a trap, but she also knew she needed to test the alien defenses if her fleet was going to have any chance of protecting New Denver. All ships, this is Admiral Wright. Target the alien flagship with main batteries. Fire when ready. The UES Liberty's main railgun batteries swiveled toward the Zephyrian command ship. The magnetic acceleration systems charged with a deep humming sound that vibrated through the hull. When the capacitors reached full power, the guns fired 6 projectiles, each weighing several tons and traveling at nearly 15% of light speed, streaked across space toward Valthane's vessel. The kinetic energy contained in those projectiles was enormous, enough to shatter an asteroid or punch through the heaviest armor humanity had ever developed. They struck the alien ship's energy shields and simply vanished. Wright watched in horror. As the projectiles hit some kind of invisible barrier around the Zephyrian vessel and disappeared completely. There was no explosion, no impact flash, no debris. The kinetic energy that should have devastated the alien ship was absorbed and converted into harmless light that danced around the crystalline hull like an aurora. Quantum resonance shields, Valthane explained, sounding bored. They convert kinetic energy into harmless electromagnetic radiation. Your crude projectiles cannot even reach our hull, let alone damage it. The technology is several thousand years old by our standards, but it seems quite advanced compared to your current capabilities. Other ships in Wright's fleet opened fire, launching missiles and firing their own railgun batteries at the alien vessels. The results were exactly the same. Every projectile, every warhead, every piece of human ordnance simply vanished when it touched the Zephyrian shields. Valthane's laughter echoed across the communication channel. Did you really believe that primitive kinetic weapons could threaten a civilization that has mastered the fundamental forces of the universe? Your technology is amusing, but it poses no more danger to us than a child throwing stones. Wright watched helplessly as Valthane's fleet began moving toward New Denver's orbital infrastructure. The aliens targeted the space elevators that connected the planet's surface to its orbital stations, and their molecular disintegration weapons reduced the massive structures to nothing in seconds. The orbital defense platforms, humanity's most advanced military installations, tried to fight back. Their heavy railguns fired continuously at the alien ships, but every shot was absorbed harmlessly by the quantum shields. The platform's missile systems launched everything they had, but the warheads might as well have been soap bubbles for all the effect they had. One by one, the defense platforms were destroyed by the alien energy weapons. The stations that had taken years to build and represented the pinnacle of human military engineering were erased from existence in moments. "This concludes today's demonstration," Althane announced. "You have seen that your weapons cannot harm us, while ours can destroy anything you have built. Withdraw your fleet and begin evacuating this system, or we will be forced to provide a more comprehensive education about the futility of resisting the hegemony." Wright stared at the tactical display, showing her fleet's complete failure to inflict any damage on the alien ships. Every advantage humanity thought they had meant nothing against technology. They could simply make their weapons disappear. The Fourth Fleet, the pride of Earth's military, had been made to look like children playing with toys. "Admiral," her tactical officer said quietly, "our weapons are completely ineffective. We can't even scratch their shields." Wright nodded slowly, her mind racing as she tried to think of any way to fight an enemy that seemed invincible. The colonists on New Denver were counting on her. General Carl Davis stood in the Pentagon's Emergency Command Center, staring at the screens that showed the complete failure of humanity's most advanced fleet. The reports from Admiral Wright were devastating. Human weapons were useless against alien technology. Every shot fired had been absorbed by shields that seemed to violate the basic laws of physics. "Get me every scientist we have," Davis ordered his aide, Colonel Nancy White. "I want physicists, engineers, weapons designers, anyone who might have an idea about how to fight these things." Within 2 hours, the brightest minds in human science were gathered in the secure conference room. Dr. Helen Martinez, head of the Advanced Weapons Research Division, was studying the sensor data from the battle with intense concentration. Her team had been working on theoretical weapons for decades, but nothing they had developed seemed relevant against technology that could make bullets disappear. "The energy readings are impossible," Dr. Martinez said, shaking her head. "There. Shields are converting kinetic energy into electromagnetic radiation with 100% efficiency. That should violate conservation of energy, but somehow they're doing it." Dr. Tony Richardson, the Pentagon's chief physicist, was running calculations on his portable computer. His fingers moved across the keyboard at incredible speed as he tried to understand how the alien shields worked. "It's not actually violating physics," he said slowly. "They're using some kind of dimensional phase shifting. The kinetic energy isn't destroyed. It's being redirected into parallel dimensional spaces." "Can you explain that in simple terms?" General Davis asked. Tony looked up from his computer. "Imagine you're throwing a ball at a window, but just before the ball hits the glass, the window becomes a doorway to another room. The ball goes through the doorway instead of breaking the window. That's essentially what these shields are doing to our bullets and missiles." Dr. Martinez frowned as she studied the combat footage again. "The question is, how do we break a window that turns into a doorway every time we try to hit it?" "Lieutenant." Commander Nick Patterson had been quietly listening to the discussion. He was former Special Operations, a soldier who had transitioned into military engineering after being wounded in action. Nick understood both the technical side of weapons and the practical reality of combat. "Maybe we're thinking about this wrong," Nick said. "We're trying to figure out how to make our bullets hit harder. But what if the problem isn't the strength of our shots? What if it's the number of shots?" Dr. Richardson looked puzzled. "I don't understand." Nick stood up and walked to the tactical display. "Look at how their shields work. Each projectile that hits them gets redirected to some other dimension, right? But that redirection process has to require calculations. The shield has to analyze each incoming projectile and figure out where to send it." "Go on, Dr. Martinez." said, beginning to see where he was headed. What happens if we don't give the shield time to analyze each projectile? What if instead of firing one big bullet, we fire 10,000 small bullets all at the same time? The room fell silent as the scientists considered this possibility. Dr. Richardson's fingers started flying across his keyboard again as he ran new calculations. The processing power required would be enormous, Tony said, his excitement growing. If each shield generator has to calculate the dimensional redirection for thousands of individual projectiles simultaneously, it might overload the system. Dr. Martinez was already sketching designs on her tablet. We could modify our railgun. Ammunition. Instead of firing one large projectile, each shot could carry thousands of smaller fragments that separate during flight. Like a shotgun blast, but in space. How small would the fragments need to be? General Davis asked. Small enough that the alien computers can't process them all at once, Nick replied. But large enough to still carry kinetic energy when they hit the ship's actual hull. Dr. Richardson was still running calculations. If we assume their shield generators can process about 1,000 individual impacts per second, we would need to deliver more than that in a much shorter time frame. Say, 10,000 fragments arriving within 1/10 of a second. Can we build ammunition like that? Davis asked Dr. Martinez. Give me 48 hours and a team of engineers, she replied. We'll need to redesign the projectile structure completely. Each round will need to contain thousands of submunitions that separate at a precise distance from the target. While the scientists worked on the new ammunition design, Captain Betty Lewis was conducting her own investigation. Her ship, the U.E.'s Shadow, was one of humanity's few stealth vessels. It was designed for reconnaissance and intelligence gathering, equipped with advanced sensors and a hull coating that made it nearly invisible to most. Detection Systems. Betty had taken the Shadow as close to the alien fleet as she dared, using the ship's passive sensors to study the Zephyrian vessels. What she discovered was both encouraging and terrifying. The alien shields aren't running at full power all the time, she reported to Admiral Wright during a coded transmission. They seem to adjust their defensive systems based on the perceived threat level. When no human ships are nearby, their shields are barely active. When they detect incoming projectiles, the shields power up to maximum strength. What does that mean for our new ammunition? Admiral Wright asked. It means they're not expecting to face massive numbers of simultaneous impacts, Betty replied. Their defensive doctrine assumes that any enemy will fire individual high-powered shots, just like we've been doing. They've never encountered an enemy that uses swarm tactics. Dr. Martinez's team worked around the clock to develop the new fragmentation rounds. The engineering challenge was enormous. Each projectile had to carry thousands of smaller fragments while still being stable enough to fire from a railgun. The fragments had to separate at exactly the right moment and maintain their trajectory toward the target. The timing has to be perfect, explained Dr. Kevin Moore, one of Martinez's lead engineers. If the fragments separate too early, they'll spread out too much and lose effectiveness. If they separate too late, the alien shields will have time to adapt each individual fragment. The first test firing took place at a military range on the far side of the moon. The modified railgun fired what looked like a normal projectile, but as it traveled downrange, the round suddenly exploded into a cloud of 10,000 tiny fragments. Each fragment was about the size of a marble, but they were made of dense metal and traveling at tremendous speed. The target, a heavily armored test platform, was shredded by the impact. The fragments punched through armor that could normally stop any human weapon. The test was a complete success, but everyone knew that testing against human armor was very different from testing against alien shields. We need to test this against actual Zephyrian technology, General Davis said. But we can't risk a full fleet engagement until we know if it works. Admiral Wright had the same thought. I'll send a single ship to engage one of their scouts. If the new ammunition works, we'll know immediately. If it doesn't work, she didn't finish the sentence, but everyone understood. If the new ammunition failed, they would lose a ship and its crew. The volunteers came forward immediately. Captain Morrison, aboard the used Dakota, was the first to request the mission. His ship had been the first to encounter the aliens, and he wanted to be the first to test humanity's new weapon against their technology. The Dakota is a good ship with an experienced crew, Morrison argued during his meeting with Admiral Wright. We've already faced these aliens once. We know what we're up against. Wright studied Morrison's service record. He was a solid officer with 15 years of experience. His crew trusted him, and he had never lost a ship or failed a mission. If anyone could make this test work, it would be Jake Morrison. Very well, Captain, Wright said finally. Your ship will be equipped with the new ammunition. Find an isolated Zephyrian vessel and test our new weapons. But Jake, if the ammunition doesn't work, don't try to be a hero. Run. Get back to the fleet and report what you learned. Morrison nodded. Understood, Admiral. But I have a feeling these aliens are about to learn that human technology isn't as primitive as they think. The U.E. Dakota was refitted with the new fragmentation rounds within 18 hours. The ship's ammunition storage had to be completely redesigned to accommodate the complex new projectiles. Each round was a masterpiece of engineering, containing thousands of precisely crafted fragments held together by magnetic fields that would release at exactly the right moment as the Dakota prepared to leave for its dangerous mission. The crew felt a mixture of excitement and terror. They were about to test a weapon that could either save humanity or prove that the aliens truly were invincible. Either way, they would be the first to know the truth. Captain Morrison stood on his bridge and looked out at the stars. Somewhere, out there, alien ships were destroying human colonies and demonstrating their technological superiority. But humans had always been good at finding unexpected solutions to impossible problems. It was time to show the galaxy that primitive didn't mean helpless. Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair aboard the used Dakota, watching the tactical display as they approached the edge of the new Denver system. 3 days had passed since the aliens had first demonstrated their overwhelming technological superiority. 3 days of watching human colonies evacuate while the Zephyrian fleet systematically destroyed anything humans had built in space. But today might be different. Today, the Dakota carried something that had never been tested against: alien technology. The ship's ammunition storage was filled with the new fragmentation rounds that Dr. Martinez's team had developed. Each projectile contained 10,000 smaller fragments, all designed to overwhelm the alien shield systems through sheer numbers rather than individual power. Contact on sensors, Captain, reported Lieutenant Amy Carter. Single Zephyrian vessel, approximately 200,000 kilometers away. It appears to be conducting some kind of survey operation. Morrison leaned forward in his chair. This was exactly what they had been looking for. An isolated alien ship, away from the main fleet, where they could test the new ammunition without risking a massive battle. What type of vessel is it? Amy checked her readings. Based on size and configuration, it appears to be a scout ship, smaller than the main battle cruisers, but still significantly larger than us. Perfect, Morrison said. A scout ship will have the same shield technology as the larger vessels, but it won't be able to call for immediate backup. He turned to his communications officer. Danny, are we far enough from the main alien fleet that they won't detect our engagement? Communications officer Danny Walsh checked his equipment. Yes, sir. At this distance, by the time they receive any distress signal and respond, we'll be long gone. Morrison nodded. Good. Amy, plot an intercept course. Let's go. Introduce ourselves to our alien friend. The Dakota changed course toward the Zephyrian scout ship, her engines pushing the vessel to maximum speed. As they approached, Morrison could see the alien vessel more clearly through the main viewport. Like all Zephyrian ships, it was beautiful. And strange, its crystalline hull reflecting the light of nearby stars in patterns that seemed almost alive. "They've detected us, Captain," Amy reported. "The alien ship is turning to face us and powering up what appears to be their weapon systems. Incoming transmission," Danny announced. "Put it on screen," Morrison ordered. The main viewer flickered and showed the image of a Zephyrian officer. This alien was smaller than Fleet Admiral Val Thane, with skin that shifted between shades of green and gold instead of blue and silver. When he spoke, his voice carried the same arrogant confidence that all the aliens seemed to possess. "I am Sub-Admiral Nexeth Qualdar of the Zephyrian Hegemony," the alien said. "You are the primitive vessel that has been observed interfering with our expansion operations. How amusing that you would approach us alone." Morrison stood up and faced the screen. "I am Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Dakota. You're trespassing in human space." Qualdar made the same laughing sound that Val Thane had made during their first encounter. "Human space? Your species controls nothing. You use primitive fusion reactors and crude kinetic weapons. You are barely capable of interplanetary travel, let alone claiming territory among the stars." "We'll see about that," Morrison replied calmly. "Indeed we will," Qualdar said, his expression becoming more serious. "Your fleet has already learned that your weapons cannot penetrate our defenses. Yet here you are, a single primitive vessel, approaching a ship of the hegemony. Are you perhaps suffering from some form of mental defect common to your species?" Morrison couldn't help but smile. The alien's arrogance was about to become a serious problem for him. "Why don't you activate your shields and find out?" Qualdar's eyes narrowed. "You wish to demonstrate your futility once more? Very well, I will indulge your death wish." The alien gestured to someone off-screen. "Defensive systems to full power. Let this primitive show us the inadequacy of his weapons before we destroy him." Morrison turned to his weapons officer, Lieutenant Roy Campbell. "Roy, load Tube 1 with a standard fragmentation round. Single shot, target their main hull section." "Aye, sir." Tube 1 loaded and ready. Morrison looked back at the screen, where Qualdar was watching with obvious amusement. "Last chance to surrender," Morrison said. "How delightfully primitive," Qualdar replied. "Fire your crude projectile, human. Let me show you why resistance to the hegemony is pointless." Morrison turned to Roy. "Fire." The Dakota's main railgun fired with its familiar deep thrumming sound. To anyone watching, it looked like a perfectly normal shot. A single projectile streaked across space toward the Zephyrian scout ship at tremendous velocity. Qualdar watched the incoming round with the same bored expression that Val Thane had shown during the fleet engagement. The alien scout's shields activated automatically as the projectile approached. Energy patterns flowed across the invisible barrier as the shield generators prepared to redirect the incoming kinetic energy into harmless electromagnetic radiation. It was a process the Zephyrians had perfected thousands of years ago, and it had never failed against any kinetic weapon. But this projectile was different at exactly the right moment. Just as the round was about to impact the alien shield's magnetic clamps released, and the single projectile suddenly became 10,000 smaller fragments. Each piece was about the size of a marble, but they were traveling at nearly the same velocity as the original round. Instead of one impact, the alien shield suddenly faced 10,000 simultaneous impacts across their entire surface. The shield generators, designed to handle massive energy redistribution from individual high-powered impacts, found themselves facing a problem they had never been programmed to solve. Each fragment required its own dimensional calculation. Each piece of metal needed to be analyzed and redirected individually. The quantum processors that controlled the shield systems suddenly had to perform 10,000 complex calculations at exactly the same time. For a moment that seemed to last forever, the alien shields flickered uncertainly. Energy patterns raced across their surface as the generators tried to process the overwhelming number of incoming projectiles. Warning lights flashed on Qualdar's bridge as his shield systems registered massive computational overload. And then, for the first time in Zephyrian military history, their shields failed. The remaining fragments, still carrying enormous kinetic energy, punched through the space where the energy barrier had been and struck the alien ship's hull directly. The crystalline armor that protected Zephyrian vessels was designed to resist energy weapons and plasma attacks. It had never been built to stop simple kinetic penetration. The fragments tore through the alien hull like bullets through paper. Atmosphere vented from dozens of holes as the scout ship's internal systems were shredded by the impact. Emergency lighting flickered on as power conduits were severed and life support systems failed. On the Dakota's bridge, the crew watched in stunned silence as the alien vessel, which had seemed invincible just moments before, began to break apart from the damage inflicted by human primitive weapons. Qualdar's image on the main screen was flickering as his ship's communication systems failed. The alien's expression had changed from arrogant amusement to shocked disbelief. "Impossible," he gasped, his translated voice distorted by static. "Our shields cannot fail? Your primitive projectiles cannot ... cannot." The transmission cut off as the Zephyrian scout ship's main reactor went critical. Morrison watched as the alien vessel, which had seemed so beautiful and advanced just minutes before, exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The bridge of the Dakota was completely silent for several seconds. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. They had just witnessed something that every human military leader had thought was impossible. They had destroyed an alien ship with technology that the Zephyrians considered primitive and useless. "Did we really just do that?" Amy asked quietly. Morrison stared at the expanding cloud of debris that had once been an alien warship. "Yes, Lieutenant. We really just did that." Roy looked up from his weapons console with a huge grin on his face. "Captain, should I prepare another fragmentation round?" "No need," Morrison replied. "I think we've learned what we came here to learn." He turned to Danny. "Send a priority message to Admiral Wright. Tell her the new ammunition works. Tell her the alien shields can be overwhelmed." As the Dakota turned away from the debris field and headed back toward the human fleet, Morrison felt a sense of satisfaction that he hadn't experienced since the aliens first arrived. The Zephyrians had advanced technology and superior weapons, but they had made one critical mistake. They had underestimated human ingenuity. The aliens thought that more advanced always meant better. They believed that their sophisticated shield systems were superior to anything humans could develop. But they had never considered that sometimes the simplest solution was the most effective one. As the Dakota's message raced toward Admiral Wright's fleet, Morrison knew that the balance of power in the war was about to shift dramatically. Zephyrians had technology that humans couldn't match, but humans had something the aliens didn't expect. They had the ability to find unexpected solutions to impossible problems. And they had just proven that primitive weapons could defeat advanced defenses if used in the right way. Fleet Admiral Valthine stared at the debris field where Sub-Admiral Qualdar's scout ship had been destroyed. The report from his sensor operators made no sense. A single human vessel had somehow destroyed a Zephyrian warship using primitive kinetic weapons. The same weapons that had been completely useless against his fleet just days before. "Scan the debris field again," Valthane ordered his science officer. "There must be some explanation for what happened." Perhaps the scout ship suffered a reactor malfunction. The science officer, a thin Zephyrian with pale blue skin, shook his head. Sir, the debris patterns are consistent with multiple kinetic impacts across the hull. The damage was caused by human projectiles penetrating the ship's armor. That is impossible, Valthane snapped. Our shields make kinetic weapons completely ineffective. The humans cannot have developed anything capable of penetrating Zephyrian defenses. But even as he spoke, Valthane felt a cold uncertainty growing in his mind. The hegemony had ruled this part of the galaxy for thousands of years, because their technology was superior to every other species they had encountered. The idea that primitives using crude projectile weapons could threaten Zephyrian ships was unthinkable. Accelerate our attack on the human colony, Valthane ordered. These primitives must be eliminated before they can develop their weapons further. We will show them that destroying one scout ship means nothing against the full power of the hegemony. The Zephyrian fleet moved toward New Denver, their crystalline hulls gleaming as they prepared to demonstrate their overwhelming technological superiority once more. Valthane was confident that whatever fluke had destroyed Qualdar's ship would not be repeated. Against his main battle fleet, he was about to learn how wrong he was. Admiral Susan Wright received Captain Morrison's message, just as her Fourth Fleet was completing its rearmament with the new fragmentation rounds. Every ship in the human fleet now carried thousands of the special projectiles that had proven capable of overwhelming alien shield systems. All ships, this is Admiral Wright, she announced over the fleet communication system. You've all read Captain Morrison's report. We now know that alien shields can be defeated. But remember, we're still facing an enemy with superior numbers and more advanced weapons. This battle will be won or lost based on our ability to coordinate our attacks and overwhelm their defenses simultaneously. The Fourth Fleet jumped into the New Denver system just as the Zephyrian ships were beginning their final assault on the colony. Wright's tactical display showed the alien fleet arranged in perfect formation, their weapons charging as they prepared to destroy the remaining human installations on the planet. Incoming transmission from the alien flagship, reported Lieutenant Brad Murphy. Put him on screen, Wright ordered. Valthane's image appeared on the main viewer, his expression showing surprise at the human fleet's return. Admiral Wright, how delightfully persistent of you. Have you come to watch as we complete the destruction of your primitive colony? I've come to remove you from human space, Wright replied calmly. Valthane laughed, the same arrogant sound that had echoed across human communication channels for days. Your weapons cannot harm us, as we have already demonstrated. Your crude projectiles are useless against Zephyrian shield technology. We'll see about that, Wright said. All ships. Attack Formation Alpha. Target the alien vessels and fire on my command. The human fleet spread out in a wide formation, using their numerical advantage to force the aliens to defend against attacks from multiple directions. Wright's strategy was simple but effective. If the fragmentation rounds could overwhelm individual alien ships, then coordinated attacks from multiple human vessels should be even more devastating. Ma'am, all ships report ready to fire, announced her tactical officer, Commander Gary Thompson. Wright watched as the Zephyrian ships turned to face the human fleet, their shields powering up to maximum strength. Valthane clearly expected another futile demonstration like the one that had occurred days before. He was about to receive the shock of his life. All ships fire, Wright ordered. The Fourth Fleet opened fire with everything they had. Dozens of railguns discharged simultaneously, sending what appeared to be a normal barrage of kinetic projectiles toward the alien ships. The Zephyrians activated their shields with the same confidence they had shown in every previous engagement, but this time was different as the human projectiles approached the alien fleet. Each round suddenly exploded into thousands of smaller fragments. Instead of facing dozens of impacts, the Zephyrian shields were suddenly dealing with hundreds of thousands of simultaneous kinetic contacts across their entire defensive perimeter. Captain Ryan Foster, commanding the heavy cruiser UES Titan, watched his tactical display as his ship's fragmentation rounds struck the nearest alien vessel. The Zephyrian ship's shields flickered and sparked as the quantum processors tried desperately to handle the massive computational overload. Direct hit, reported Foster's weapons officer. Their shields are failing. The same scene was repeated across the entire battle space. One by one, the supposedly invincible Zephyrian shield systems overloaded and collapsed under the unprecedented barrage of simultaneous impacts. The aliens had built their defenses to handle the most powerful individual weapons imaginable, but they had never considered facing swarm attacks that could overwhelm their processing capabilities. Valthane watched in horror as his fleet's primary defensive systems failed for the first time in Zephyrian military history. The crystalline hulls of his ships, designed to resist energy weapons, provided no protection against simple kinetic penetration. Human fragments punched through alien armor like bullets through glass. Impossible, Valthane gasped his damage. Reports flooded his command center. Our shields cannot fail. The technology is perfect. But the evidence was right in front of him. 3 of his ships had already suffered critical damage from human weapons that he had dismissed as primitive and useless. The fragments were small individually, but there were so many of them that his vessels couldn't avoid taking devastating hits. Return fire, Valthane ordered desperately. Destroy the human ships with plasma weapons. The Zephyrian fleet fired back with their advanced energy weapons. Beams of superheated plasma lanced across space toward the human vessels, and 2 destroyers were vaporized instantly by the alien counterattack. The humans still faced a technologically superior enemy, but now the aliens could be hurt. Captain Lavra Hayes, commanding the destroyer U-East Ranger, saw an opportunity as the alien formation broke apart under the human assault. One of the Zephyrian ships had moved away from the main group, its shields flickering as it tried to repair the damage from the fragmentation attack. All weapons, target that damaged alien ship, Hayes ordered. Maximum rate of fire. The Rangers. Railguns fired repeatedly, sending wave after wave of fragmentation rounds toward the isolated Zephyrian vessel. Each impact overwhelmed the alien ship's already damaged shields, and kinetic fragments tore through the crystalline hull in dozens of places. The alien ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light, its advanced reactor core breached by simple human projectiles. Across the battle space, other human ships were achieving similar successes. The Zephyrian fleet, which had seemed invincible just minutes before, was being systematically destroyed by weapons they had considered too primitive to be dangerous. Valthane realized that his technological superiority meant nothing if his shields couldn't protect his ships. The humans had found a way to turn the Zephyrians' own advanced defensive systems against them, using massive numbers of simple projectiles to overwhelm quantum processors that had been designed for entirely different threats. All ships concentrate fire on the human flagship, Valthane ordered, his voice filled with desperate rage. If we can destroy their admiral, perhaps the rest will retreat. The remaining Zephyrian vessels turned their weapons toward Admiral Wright's flagship, the UES Liberty. Plasma beams and energy weapons converged on the human ship, overwhelming its defensive systems and breaching the hull in multiple places. The Wright was ready for this attack. All ships, protect the flagship, she ordered. Focus your fire on the alien command vessel. Every human ship in range turned their weapons toward Valthane's crystalline flagship. Hundreds of fragmentation rounds struck the alien vessel simultaneously, completely overwhelming its shield generators and punching through its armor like tissue paper. Valthane felt his ship shaking apart around him as human Projectiles tore through the command deck. Emergency systems failed one by one as kinetic fragments severed power conduits and destroyed control systems. The alien admiral, who had thought humans were too primitive to pose a real threat, was about to be killed by weapons he had considered obsolete, impossible, Valthane whispered as his ship's life support systems failed. How can such primitive weapons defeat advanced Zephyrian technology? He never received an answer. The flagship's reactor core was breached by a particularly large fragment, and the entire vessel disappeared in a nuclear fireball that could be seen from the surface of New Denver. With their fleet admiral dead and half their ships destroyed, the remaining Zephyrian vessels activated their faster-than-light drives and fled the system. They carried with them the shocking news that humans,